the show that goes into detail of all the techniques and perhaps tools that come up in the Great British Sewing Bee. And we can do that because we have time to do that, whereas the show doesn't. And we do that each week, as always, with our master tailor couturier, Carol Elaine. Hey, Carol.
Hi, Stuart. Hello again.
Yeah, indeed. For week 2, Sports Week. Are you a bit of a sports person, Carol?
Well, I like the look. I like the sporty look. I'm much more comfortable in sporty clothes than I am in, I guess, dressy clothes, as it were.
Yeah. Did you do a bit of sport in your younger days? I can imagine you as a tennis player.
Loads. Gymnastics, tennis. But I love baseball. It's our national sport in America. So I coached Little League. I coached softball. I played baseball my whole life. I love the game, and I still, believe it or not, I still watch the whole of the American and National League online whenever I can.
Wow.
It's a beautiful game.
That's audience. Did you see my mouth drop there? Did you all just go wow at all that? I was not expecting that for sport. Fabulous. I'm a sport fan too. Athletics, it's probably because I'm 6'4", so I was great at hurdles, great at sprinting, and of course basketball, because
you go.
Could
Yes.
do a layup.
Easy dunk.
I loved it, and tennis. I'm a mean left-hander, you see.
I bet you.
And a double backhander.
Are you a southpaw, as they say?
Hey, what?
Are you a southpaw?
Oh, I don't know what that is.
Do you are you left-handed?
Oh yes, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
well then you're a southpaw. Congratulations to it.
There you are. So I was looking forward to Sportswear Week. I am a big fan of sportswear, as you say, often in the evenings, or at the gym. So looking forward to this. As we were watching, and I know you saw straight away, one of the techniques that came up several times was top stitching.
Well. Top stitching is it's a technique that you use to, it can be decorative, it can be a feature, see it on the top of the garment, or it can be functional. So it can serve to, say, secure all the seams in one direction. It can have a function which isn't seen, or it can be something that you do see. And it can be wildly decorative. So some of your fancier computer machines, you see they have these function buttons on them, and you can do all sorts of shapes, and they're repetitive. So you can have a flower and another flower and another flower, or any other kind of repetitive shape. And you can do that in a contrast thread, or you can do that in a tone-on-tone thread. And again, if it's tone-on-tone, it's maybe just a lighter bit of interest. But if it's a high contrast, then it really does show. So that's basically what top stitching is.
Wow.
It has serves two purposes.
Yeah, I didn't know that, because I thought top stitching was literally, as you said, the decorative, where you top stitch for it to look nice. Like I'm looking down at my jeans, and you get that lovely copper orange top stitching all around, don't you? But
that's right.
Didn't know about the function, the second part of it.
Yes, and some top stitching serves both purposes. So you've just mentioned your jeans.
Yeah.
So you'll have a twin, you'll have parallel stitching, maybe on the inside leg.
Yeah, I can see it on the
there you go. So that serves two purposes. It's decorative, but it also serves to really reinforce that structure. And it makes that seam very sturdy, and it encases the lining and any other interior architecture that's in there. So a stay stitch, or a piece of stay tape, which we talked about last week.
Oh, yes.
When you talked about your wrap dress, you were going to get a stay tape. So if you install a stay tape, turn it onto the inside so that it's now invisible, and top stitch it, you see? So that top stitch encases part of that architecture.
In my development as a sewer, I have done top stitching. I'm going to confess I think I don't treat it as a serious technique, I think. Does that sound right? I think I do it at the end just to top stitch it down, and it almost feels like, oh yeah, I just finish off with a top stitch. And actually, as I'm top stitching, I'm thinking, hang on, this is actually quite a serious finish. So I should be treating this with a lot more respect than perhaps I have done, because just because it sometimes comes across, oh yeah, when you watch a YouTube tutorial, they'll say, yeah, and just finish with a top stitch. So I think I've developed this bad respect for this technique, and it deserves a lot more time than perhaps we often give it for. Would you say?
I would say, and the thing is, when you're done, you treat it however you want to, seriously or not, but it's going to offend your eye.
Yeah.
If it's not accurate, it's not straight,
yeah.
if it isn't parallel, it's going to bug you.
Yeah.
And it's going to remind you every time you look at it. So that's why you then treat it as a serious polishing technique. And that's exactly what it is.
Let's first of all go into these first tutorial that Carol's prepared for us, where we look at the two types, functional and decorative.
Top stitching. This is an excellent way to emphasize a structural detail, or to hold seam allowances flat, or to add interest to fabric. Top stitching can be functional, or it can be decorative. So let's have a look at this circular cuff that I've made here. Now, we want the outer edge of this cuff to be very clean and neat. And to accomplish that, I've put in, on the underside, a row of understitch. Now, some people call this a bluff edge stitch. They call it that in factories, but I'm used to calling it an understitch. And what it does is it makes sure that the seam is directed to the underside, and so it always keeps this top edge proud, and it doesn't roll back to the underside. So that's called an understitch. Now here's another method of using a top stitch where I've bound a curved edge with a bias strip on the double, and I have top stitched in the ditch. Sometimes this is called a sink stitch. So this is a functional way of top stitching, and it's not meant to show. It shows on the underside here, but it's invisible on the outer edge. Another example of decorative top stitching is we have this casing here. We've got an elastic cord in there, and this casing then will gather in and out. And on the outer edges of this casing, we have a top stitch. Now you might notice that this stitch is quite long. And one of the things you do when you top stitch, you have to practice, you have to make yourself some samples to decide just what length of top stitch is going to look best. And this depends on the type of fabric that you're using and how the needle is selected and how this reacts to the cloth that you're using. Here's another example of some quilting top stitch. And in this case, we have a contrast thread, red over the blue, and this is sandwiching a backing fabric and a quilting fabric. And this is done to create layers of fabric that creates warmth and structure. Now, we talked about preparation a lot when we're sewing. And one of the things to do with top stitching is to reinforce the area that you're working with. And to do this, you can choose from a number of products. Here I have a fusible woven interfacing. This, you can see, is very sturdy on the straight. It's not going to stretch. So if you were to prepare your fabric with this before you top stitched, then you would be assured that everything is going to lay flat and it's going to have some structure behind it. If you're sandwiching 2 layers of fabric, you can also use this fusible, which is basically a glue. Once this is inserted and pressed, it acts as an adhesive, and so you can't take these apart. It's glued together. Another product which you could use to reinforce is this strip. It's actually on the bias, and it's fusible, but it has this stitching line here, which adds structure, gives it some straight of the grain so that it doesn't stretch. So here's a set of examples of what top stitching can do, functional or decorative. How to prepare, make samples, make tests of all the types of top stitching that you want to achieve, and just to keep practicing until you get the look that you want before you embark on finishing your product. Another thing that you might need to do when you're top stitching is you might want a heavier thread. And for this, you need a needle that the eye is going to be big enough for this to pass through. So you've heard me talk about using a size 10 needle for most of my work. But if you're using a thicker thread, you're going to want to go to a size 14 or a 16 needle. And again, just keep practicing until you get the look that you want and you achieve the tension and the final appearance and the stitch length that is going to suit your design.
I've got this ready because this is a bespoke piece that I'm working on now.
Oh.
And it's an interpretation of a jean jacket, and it's for a senior person. And this is for a person who spends a lot of time on Zoom. So what she likes is she likes a very authoritative collar.
Okay.
So the first thing I did to meet the brief was to double interface. This is wool crepe. So it is very drapey. It molds its sculpture. It's really nice. But I thought it might help us today because I'm putting in a zip, which is just decorative. It's not going to function. But my client will benefit from some strong vertical lines. I'll just say that. So the zip is put in with a double parallel layer of top stitch. So it functions to set the zip in. The decorative nature of it, you can't see. It's a black thread on a black zip tape. You can't see it.
Ah, right.
Okay? So it's just functional.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, as we move around the garment, I don't know if you can see this. I've got a little jean pocket here.
Oh, yeah.
Can you see that? And now this is decorative. So I have parallel stitching lines, 1/4 inch apart, to set that pocket in.
Oh, lovely.
Okay. Also, if we go around the jacket, I've put in French seams, and every major seam, it's a French seam, and then I've top stitched it on the outside.
Oh, wow.
So it is decorative in that you can see that parallel stitch, but it's functional because it's giving a very secure, stable seam finish, okay? And that there's a lot of seams in it. There's a top stitch on the yoke, there's top stitches on the side back, and it's just a combination. I will, when it's all done, I will top stitch the collar edge as well. So that will keep the facing attached to the forepart. Right now it can come away, but I will add a layer of top stitching. So that's kind of an example of how you can combine the two.
How often is top stitching length, the stitching length, does that always change? Is it always longer on top stitching?
It's generally longer, but it's just, I would always say, make a sample, make a test sample. Now you've got a 1/4 inch check. It's not an even check. I think it's more of a, if I'm looking at that, yeah, it's a bit of a rectangular check, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
The white stripe is slightly wider than the blue stripe.
Yeah.
Going horizontally. Yes, you want to stitch because you're going to have 4 layers of fabric. You're going to have your 2 layers and then your seam underneath. So, and depending on which way you direct that seam, you could be sewing through 4 layers of fabric. Always check your stitch length and adjust it so that the needle and the presser foot are happy passing through, passing along, securing everything. Generally, you're right, it's the longest stitch, but just how long is your call.
Yeah. And a very good point about saying test it, because some of my top stitching, I think when it went through a lot of layers or going over a bump, my top stitching suddenly goes really tiny.
Exactly. And that's when you want to, now on my industrial machine, I have a knee pedal. So I will raise the presser foot just a little bit as I'm going over more thickness of cloth.
Yeah.
So that the presser foot isn't jamming down on those layers, which is what causes the machine to slow down. And when it slows down, your stitches are going to be closer together.
Oh.
Now, you can, while you're sewing, you can with your finger, your one hand, you can just raise that presser foot just a little bit. Keep sewing with your foot pedal.
Yeah.
You see, you're just giving the presser foot a bit of relief so
Yeah.
that it can plow through.
Yeah.
As it,
Oh, I'm loving all this. Loving all this. And another thing, see, this is all talking about look, and I know you've done another video for us, tutorial about how top stitching can look. I found where I sometimes, my top stitching goes wrong, and I don't think I'm going to be able to show it to you, but with my shirt, I have to do flat fell seams. And so with the set-in sleeve, the flat fell is on the inside. But when sometimes I sometimes do my top stitching. Can we see it here?
I can see that, Stuart. Yes, I absolutely.
Sometimes I have to stop and alter my fabric because I'm going around a curve, and I start again, and I get a
you got a zigzag there. Almost.
Yeah, that was so frustrating.
Yes, that is frustrating because you're sewing from the underside and you think, oh, this looks straight on the underside. You turn it around and the top face, which everybody sees and you look at all the time, that's where your stitching isn't parallel to the seam line. You know, it's not following that parallel.
No, it's gone.
Line.
Because
it's got a big zigzag. It's hopped around, hasn't it?
Is that when I've stopped and repositioned the fabric?
Yes, exactly. And that is the trickiest thing to do, is to try to do something really accurately and parallel to the seam when you're sewing from the wrong side.
Yeah.
That's a really tricky thing to do. Don't beat yourself up about that. Don't worry about it. Keep making shirts. It's going to work itself out. Does it occur to you? Do you remember one of our first discussions about symmetry? Do you remember that?
Yes, the hands, left and right.
Left and right, opposites. Right? Are you coming to terms with that when you're sewing? Do you automatically say, oh, I've got 2 sleeves. There's my front notch. My front notch has to match. It has to be opposite.
Getting better.
Are you getting that? Good.
Yes. Yeah.
Good.
And I have to, which helps me, I have to do each stage on the right, and then don't do the whole sleeve on the right. I do each stage, then I go to the left. Then I do the next bit on the right, and then do the next bit on the left, because I want to keep getting that opposite right.
That's good. That's excellent.
I find that's a better method than doing all the right sleeve and then coming back to the left sleeve to do the plackets, the set-in, the fell, the cuff. That doesn't work for me anymore. I have to do each bit together as I go along.
Well, that makes perfect sense. Because if you complete something on the right, you can't see the stages that got you there.
Yeah.
And then you go to do the left one and you think, well, how do I go from here to there? I've got
exactly.
nothing.
Yeah.
And that's finished.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. That's the way to treat it. And then over time, you'll learn. Over time, you'll see the steps that are embedded on one side. But for now, you're absolutely spot on to repeat each stage in symmetry.
And then I'll just keep practicing that top stitching. So let's go into that second video then of how top stitching can look, and see Carol explaining to us top stitching and how it can look.
So now we're going to do a top stitching using a contrasting thread on quite a tricky slippery fabric. So I've chosen a longer stitch. This is about 3.5 on the industrial machine. Okay. Now I'm going to sew until I'm ready to stop, and in this case I'm just going to do a quick back stitch. Now I want to show you what can go wrong with top stitching. So here we are. So I'm going to sew a back stitch and look at our result. Okay, not very nice, is it? The one thing back stitch does is it tidies it up, it reinforces it, but if it's not accurate, your stitches can actually fall out of line, and if that's your finished product, it's not going to look very nice. So here's another way around that. Let's set this all up again. Same stitch. Before we decide we're going to stop, let's just stop sewing. Let's take the fabric out of the machine, give ourselves enough of a tail here. This is the right side of the fabric. This is the wrong side. If you take the thread from the wrong side, give it a gentle tug, you can see this loop that's created from the upper thread. And here you can just pull that through, okay? And you can see that if you tie this off, you go to the front, and this is going to be your finished last stitch. So you can either have this, or you can have something like this. And I think we know which one we would prefer. So you just take these two threads and tie them in a nice square knot. I would tie 2 or 3 knots just to make sure that everything is going to be secured. And if you really want to make a very clean finish, you can take a needle and you can thread these two back into a needle, thread that back into the needle, and then you can feed this through and have these 2 threads disappear under the fabric so that this is your finished product.
Well, there we are. We've seen how to do top stitching, how it could look, and also how to get out of top stitching. I've done that so many times where I've back stitched.
Yes, and it can look like what they call a crushed beetle. You know, you go back and forth and back and forth. You don't know what it's going to look like because your presser foot's covering everything up. And then when you take your work out, you've got things it's not parallel, it's not clean. So that's why we've shown that way out.
Oh no, it's perfect, because that's exactly what we saw on the sewing bee this week, didn't we? There were a couple of instances of top stitching where that was commented on, where they'd just gone backwards and forwards.
You got a completely clean job. Everything is nice. It's all lined up. And where does the eye go? It goes to that back, forth, that knot where someone tries to backstitch, and it's done in a hurry. And
I think we saw it a couple of times. I think we saw it on because top stitching came up in the pattern challenge on those shoes.
Yes.
And I think we saw it in the, was it the made to measure? I think, was it Steve? I think Steve or someone.
I think it was Steve's technical piece. Yes, where he was top stitching with a darker blue thread on a white ground. Yeah. And it just,
But do you think, well, I'm thinking now, hypothesizing, that going backwards element is, again, from what I said to you at the beginning, where we treat top stitching as that, and just finish with a bit of top stitching. It's seen as a quick thing to do, so therefore we go round and go back stitch and done. Is it that we're not treating this technique with the respect that it deserves and the time that it deserves?
I think so. Beware of the word just. Yeah, just do this. Yeah. Just do this and you're done. Well, if you treat it like that, you can make a bit of a mess. And this is the final polish. Yeah. This is the end of the job that you're doing. And everything all the effort you've put in, everything is clean as a whistle. And then you get to the end, just top stitch, just back stitch it off, just trim your threads. Oh no, what a mess. And
I've learned so much. And I know I've done that. I've been sewing all day, and then you do your top stitching and you think, all right, I could just do this in 10 minutes to finish off. And it's completely, now we're talking about it, it's completely the wrong thing to do, because you've got this wonderful garment that you've spent a long time cutting out the pieces for, sewing them together, to then fudge it at the last minute by quickly doing your top stitching.
Yes. And you've got a bit of a knot, and the eye goes there. It sees it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't forget it, by the way.
Yeah.
Now, there is a way out of it, as we've just seen, because if you go back and forth, and you get a bit of a knot, you can always back those off with a careful unpicking of your work, and then just draw everything to the back and bury it. Knot it off and bury it.
Yes.
So it's look, that thing that will offend the eye every time you look at it, there is a remedy for it. It's allowing the time, and it's allowing the attention.
Yeah. Oh, I do love it when we talk like this. You learn so much, but it reinforces that appreciation of the skill and what is involved.
It does, and it's a patience building exercise. Yeah. But if you reinforce these things, you keep using that word, you reinforce it, and then you learn as you go. And pretty soon these things start to make themselves, and it becomes a very spiritual exercise, doesn't it? You've made 3 shirts, you keep doing that, and you won't even realize where you are in the process.
Love it. Absolutely. Oh, I do so love it when we talk like this. Right, well, let's now just have a quick look through at the challenges themselves. And so the pattern challenge was shoes, never been done before. Whew,
that was ambitious. That was ambitious, wasn't it? Because now you've got a plastic, shape, and you are trying to mold a textile into that shape, that rigid shape. That was a complete surprise to me. And I think that what I missed in that challenge, I missed the procedure where they tell you how this is all going to go together.
Absolutely.
So we should have been told that in the sole of the shoe, there was X amount of holes.
Yeah.
And that the contestants then had to prepare those holes in the bottom of each side of the shoe. And those holes had to match up. And that's what they were, sewing in and out and in and out, and skipping a stitch between those holes, right? Yeah. And so because they only made one pass around, going in and out and in and out, it wasn't very sturdy, was it?
Mm.
So they could have gone around the other way and then actually connected all the holes with another stitch around again. Because they only went, one direction, didn't they? So you had that missing stitch.
Yeah,
it was completed on the way back, and we weren't told that, and we were just told that the stitching had to be accurate. Well, why?
Yeah.
Why? How did they make it accurate? And then I think the comment was made that if they don't do this right, then the shoe will rotate and it will look a bit squint, which is a bit meaningless.
Yeah, I was lost. Yeah.
Anyway, as we saw the contestants struggle on, we as an audience, we put that together, didn't we?
Yeah. We know how hard eyelets are, but 28 eyelets on one hand, that's going to take its toll. That grip through 2 layers of fabric, that's demanding for anyone, let alone under pressure and 28 time. So I felt for some of those contestants who struggled with the grip.
Absolutely. And it depends on how they prepared those holes, because we have installed eyelets in previous tutorials, and it's how you prepare that hole so that the end eyelets will go through easily. And when, it was a bit overwhelming. They got to do 28 holes. Well, it was a pair of 7, right?
Yeah.
7 fours.
Yeah.
Once you break it down, okay, then it made sense how they had to line up. So again, it was that technical language that we could have used to understand how it is breaking down the steps, which would have been helpful. But you're right, to have to do 28 of those and under pressure.
Yeah.
That was a big ask.
It was a hard watch, and it was hard. I felt for some of those contestants, Angela and Jill, who they were just like physically can't grip. And the strength in that. So, and I saw other bees helping out. That was nice, but I did feel for them. So at that round, we had Angela 11th, Jill 10th, partly because it wasn't finished because of that eyelet issue. And at the top, we had Man Yi first, Annie second, and Mani third. And some nice color choices. We had some nice variation on the toe to fabric. Mani's was all in one. She didn't go for a contrast toe, did she? She had all in one fabric.
Everything was in one, and that's because it was quite a muscular challenge. The people that decided to feature on the toe cap and on the heel of the shoe to do that was really ambitious, because it was a very muscular ask, to get the eyelets in and to do the sewing. So I think that's part of the strategy. I'm going to just take one fabric and just try to get this all right in one. And then you don't risk things twisting out of place, do you?
Yes, yeah. I think from what I've seen online today, I think there's been a big run on kits, because you can buy that trainer. The Converse. That's me in my basketball. You see, wearing those shoes. And I think many places have sold out. So I think it is something you can do. I think you can buy those. So it might inspire people. Would it inspire you to make some high tops?
I think I would. Maybe. I think from at my age, I need a bit of an insole. I need a bit of contour inside my shoe. I do a lot of walking, so I don't think I would, be interested in making a flat pair of shoes. But hey.
But it was interesting, as I say, we saw some top stitching there, because they had to do it on the toe bit, and some had used similar threads, some had used contrasting threads, some were brave, because it is a brave thing to do, as we now know.
It is, absolutely. And to keep that top stitching parallel, you have to use your presser foot, don't you? You have to decide what part of your tool you're going to use to line up, so that you're guaranteed a parallel result. Yeah.
Right, let's move on to the transformation challenge. Netball kit, having to turn a skirt, top and a bib into a glamorous daywear garment.
Glamorous daywear.
Well, we've talked about the transformation challenge before. It's a total transformation, isn't it? That's what they're always getting at. They want something, really to talk about, don't they? Taking these things and turning it into that. And I'm sure they could do it elsewhere. I think in season 1, it used to be more about taking a garment and transforming it by making something like, take this plain skirt and make it suitable for an evening presentation. So I might put some piping underneath. I might put a couple more darts in to make it a bit more
fitted.
Yes. And that, to me, is a transformation. I think they take the word transformation going from one thing to something completely different. But transforming isn't that, is it?
No, I think that, and this particular week frustrated me, because I think they're looking for something which is unrecognizable from where they started.
Yeah.
But I think we saw there was a couple of items that stood out for me. And one was the zebra, the reversing of the pleats and making that unbelievably beautiful. flip-flopping of the
It
pleats.
was
And-
Deborah. She sewed up the pleats, didn't she? Or against it, yes.
Well, that was the first prize, without a doubt. The second prize, I really like Jill's, because Jill made a bit of a checkerboard with hers.
Beautiful colours as well, but yes, it was.
Beautiful colours. And it was, it was unrecognizable, and it was a really beautiful use of the cloth.
Yeah.
And that I think
pleats on this, I think the sleeves, wasn't it? They had the checkerboard there, and then
yeah. So those were my 1 and 2. Number 3, I forgot who I put for number 3, but I would have put Brogan at maybe 4, 5, or 6, because it was just taking the skirt and making a top out of it. You know, that it wasn't, to me, it wasn't a transformation, although it looked completely different from the kit. But to me, it didn't have the ingenuity by a long shot than Jill and Deborah's did.
Well, Deborah's is just exactly what we're saying. It was transformed just by doing one thing. Like I said, with this skirt, adding a bit of piping, and she's transformed it. And it was worn differently. It was like, top little thing with it, sideways. Yeah.
And when you do that, when you think about the simplest effect, to completely change the look and the feel and the vibe of a garment, just by doing that one little flip. Hats off to Deborah. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Have you ever done anything like that with a garment before?
So, just so happens. So, if I take this jacket off, I want to show you, this is something that's going to go to the BAFTAs tomorrow. And it's
really?
Yeah. It was a last minute request. And so this is a kimono.
Yeah.
But it's a kimono dress. So it had a longer sleeve that was very fitted.
Oh yes, right down to the wrist.
Yeah, with the button cuff down to the wrist. It's not suitable for the wearer. It's not going to work. Wrap dresses are very difficult to pull off if you have shape. And we saw that last week.
Didn't we just? Yes.
Yeah. So this area, in order to accommodate a larger bust, a bit of a larger girth. So what I did to transform this, I took it from a wrap dress.
Yeah.
And do you remember our poppers? Do you remember?
Oh, what, from last season? Yeah.
From last season.
On the kids' romper.
On the kids' romper. So what I did was and I'm using the facing. You see there's a facing.
Oh, yeah, bring it forward a bit. Can you bring it forward a tad?
Oh, yes, of course. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so there is a facing inside here. You can see the interfacing there.
Yeah.
There's that. So I decided to release some of that facing and use a popper. So I'm building a center front line in poppers. So there's the first one, which releases some of the facing, gives it a little bit of a twist. Yeah. And then I go down the center front of it. Instead of having it wrap over, it's now going to be a center front closure.
All right. Oh, push it back a bit now so we can.
Yeah. So now, and you get this little ruffle effect down the center front. And now when you tie it up, it's different. It's transformed into a center front with this ruffle effect. And
but you can get a nice cleavage effect there now, can't you?
And
very sexy.
That's what she wants. She said, "This is the part of me that I like."
Yeah.
And then the sleeve is now much fuller, so it's back to like a kimono effect without looking like a shirt. So I'm going to leave this cuff, and I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to take the buttons off and just let it fall, and and it's going to look really nice. And this I'm going to deliver at 11 o'clock this evening.
Oh, wow.
But it's graceful. It doesn't have that bathrobe look like a wrap dress can have. Yeah. And it's got all this interest down the center front, all this lovely fullness and ruffle effect. So
and it's
this,
free and flowing. If
it is.
your client walks down, she'll feel good. It fits.
It's a confident garment where before you have to watch, oh, is it unwrapping?
Yeah.
You know, how do I secure it? Is it falling away? Is it parting? You know, how dangerous is it? Well, there's no problem because this is all secure. There's no way that's going to part. So it's a complete transformation within the parameters.
Yeah, and that's So it's not a take this thing, chop it up, stick bits on, and 15, 20 other actions in between. You've got what, 3 actions there? The popper, release the interface, release that bit there, tied to the front, not the side, and the wrists. The band.
That's it. I didn't run to haberdashery once.
No.
No. Just as it is, just and she's over the moon because it is about confidence.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you want to put something on, forget about it.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Transforming, you think you've got to do 50 billion things, but actually you don't. You can take a garment, and that's what I think is missing from the transformation challenge, isn't it? That's where the skill is, isn't it? Take a garment, and how can you transform this to fit this brief? And it's a pinpointed brief. Do you do one thing? Do you do 2 things? You don't need to do 50 billion things, do you?
Well, they're absolutely right. You don't have to chop it up into a million pieces, turn it upside down, inside out. You don't have to do any of that. And I think that's where Deborah has won the challenge, in my opinion, because she just took a time, thought about it. No bells and whistles. It was just the biggest success.
Maybe we'll see that more. It might be nice to watch for that over the coming transformations this season. Actually, do we see winners who win the transformation round from doing fewer actions, but by still simply transforming it, rather than it being, as you say, a total transformation? It might be something to watch out for, mightn't it?
I think so. And if it isn't recognized, we can do that here.
Yeah,
we can recognize.
Indeed. So it's actually interesting, isn't it? So Brogan came first on that one, and Deborah, what we were just talking about, came second. So perhaps in our evaluation, Deborah would have been first.
Yes.
Yeah. And Richie, the other end, was 10th, and Annie was 11th. Right, let's move on then to the made to measure. Now, the made to measure round was to produce a jacket inspired by a sporting hero. I don't know about you, but I was overwhelmed by the talent of these makers, these sewers. Their jackets, there wasn't just 1 or 2 amazing ones. There were 10 or 11 amazing ones.
Absolutely. And some of them were quite, couture influenced, the lace sleeve and the one lace sleeve and cutaways. And then I like the climbing jacket with all the mosaic, all the different fabrics. And then, of course, that great functional coat at the end. I think it was Marnie's with
brilliant. With the
hidden storm collar in there. Yeah. It's beautiful. Yes, really ambitious stuff. It's quite a variety. Everyone seemed to have their own individual take on it.
Indeed, but everyone also, I just thought, they seemed very well practiced. Have they been using their time better? I know we can't go into too much because they're probably post-pandemic, so they might have been back home again and had more time to practice than perhaps last season. But they just seemed to be all very accomplished. There was no one. Sometimes you get 4 or 5 who are having some really bad moments, but that didn't seem the way. Yes, Chi-Chi was struggling with hers, but they seemed to be blowing it out of the park, weren't they?
Oh, yes. They were all really effective. They're ambitious in their design, beautifully assembled all their materials together. Lots of lovely contrast and colors and use of mixed media and very, really impressive.
Tell me, I know, was it Chi Chi? Yes, Chi Chi was doing the applique, wasn't she, on top?
Yes.
Now, I've only done a little bit of applique or applique. I don't know, I don't know which way you pronounce it. I've always called it applique. It's a difficult technique to do quickly because, from my experience, it can look kind of textile art-wise. Tell me about the skill of applique and what she was actually trying to do.
Yeah, I think what you want to achieve in the end is you want to achieve a very clean, flat application. Applique can sometimes come out a bit curly, a bit bumpy. So again, preparation of the applique itself, maybe put some fusing behind it. Use a lot of pins to place it. Maybe use a bit of Wonder Bomb to kind of press it into shape so it's nice and flat. And then choose a stitch, which is not, it depends if it's really close together. Of course, these people aren't working on a flat machine. They're working on an open arm machine, aren't they? There's a distance between the table and the sewing surface.
And that causes issues, that weight.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're trying to turn something around and move it about, and that contributes to that curliness. So I think preparation is the key on that one. Also, if she's choosing an applique, which is a bit stretchier than her base cloth, then she's going to run, that's going to be a trick. So again, it's kind of fusing the applique into shape so it's flat and it's going to tape to the base cloth. So it's a very challenging thing. I think she executed it pretty well, considering that free arm machine and having to do it in a limited time.
But that's what I think has struck me these sewers on week 2, the skills that they're trying already and actually doing them really well. Again, we had piping, didn't we? What did you think of Deborah's piping on her
beautifully done
Welsh one? Wasn't it?
Yeah, beautifully done, because it was more on the bias of the jacket and matched into the sleeve, didn't it? Beautifully done.
I do like athletics. So Brogan's Team GB, the blue, white, and pink I just loved that one.
That was beautiful.
Getting those points to meet that, I mean, it is hard, isn't it?
It is difficult, yes. And then when you have a center zip, then you have to align the left and the right side of the zip. Because if that doesn't match up, if the pattern isn't matching, when you zip it up, even if it's like, you talk about offending the eye with a back stitch, which is a bit off. Something even 1/8 of an inch off is just going to shout it when you zip it up. So
it was nice seeing some patchwork there. Man Yi was doing that lovely front that was made up of lots of piecing together.
Yes.
To represent like the climbing wall.
Climbing wall. I really like that.
It was so cleverly done because it wasn't just like squares patchwork. Some were curved seams, weren't they? Y seams. In my world of patchwork, most of I try and avoid Y seams because they're just fiddly, aren't they? To get that lovely Y shape.
Yeah, she did it really beautifully. I mean, the only thing I would have changed is on some of the more transparent panels, I would have directed the seam allowances away so that you didn't see those seam allowances coming through on the more transparent. And I think there was another one, I think it might have been Steve, who had his facing in a contrast print underneath the white, and that showed through. So
lovely, wasn't it?
Look, they were all beautiful, but these are just minor things. It's just even not worth nitpicking about because they did so well. But those are just a couple of things that you don't expect when you're sewing, because you just think, oh, I'm working with the contrast. We'll make the facing out of that. And then suddenly, oops, it shows through. But No, it's just so minor compared to the successful execution that they all saw
Wasn't it
through.
just? We've got Jill with her bomber jacket again with black gold, wasn't it, and the black piping, and so Annie and her Serena Williams, the tennis one, the what was it, sort of the two colors and the curves. Curve seams I struggle with anyway, because flat seams is okay because you've got two straight lines together, but when you're doing a curve, you've got your mountain and your valley, haven't you?
And I remember, now that I think back, I think, was she the one who was saying, oh, this is tricky because I'm working on a concave edge and a convex edge, and I've got them together. Yeah. So you draw that in the pattern. Then when you cut it out, of course they're opposing.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like the north bank and the south bank of a river, right?
Yes.
And sometimes it depends where that is. If it's in a really fitted garment, and you're trying to combine a dart into a curved seam, well, then you've got to add ease on. So, but in any case, it's just tricky. And if you're working with, say, like a ripstop nylon or something that doesn't move at all, then you've got to control that ease really carefully. Where if you're working with something like scuba or tweed, it's more forgiving, and it's more a cloth that's ready to sculpture for you. So it helps you out.
But it's just hard doing that mentally. You've got this, you're concave, and what did you say? What was the other one? Concave?
Convex.
Convex. Yeah. Hence why I just call it a mountain or a valley.
That's it. We know what you mean.
Yeah. It doesn't seem intuitive, does it, when you're sewing curves?
It doesn't seem like it's going to go together.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
It seems like this isn't going to work. But then when it presses out, you think, that does marry up.
I just really enjoyed this episode. We got to the end, and I was like, that's great, love that. So many techniques and talents. I just got to the end and I was smiling. Didn't know who really was going to go home. Sadly, we lost Chi-Chi, and it was this made to measure that did it for her, really. But then we had Garment of the Week, which was Marnie, and that wonderful jacket with the pockets and the hood and
the concealed storm collar and everything. Yeah. I liked Chi-Chi because she said she was taught to sew when she was 6. And when I was 6, I was making my own clothes. Oh. And I thought, there's someone else out there who learned at such a young age. And obviously, you take to it. And it's strange how, when you learn and you do take to it, it sort of just takes you away and you follow it. But I'm sad to see her go, because I think she had some really ambitious ideas. Yeah. Maybe if she had a bit more time in the studio, then she could have relaxed into it, and we would have seen some really quite special things. But anyway, here we are.
So there we are, end of week 2. We are now down to, we started with 12, we're down to 10 sewers. We're going to now start seeing more personalities come out and seeing what they're capable of. And it will be really nice over the coming weeks when we get more and more detail to perhaps see who improves, because we often did that last season, didn't we? We got to see the development of individuals, because it's hard to do that with 12 or even 10. So hopefully over the coming weeks we'll see that, won't we?
You do lose yourself. And then I think we kind of get used to people that are placing in a certain way. People that are always sort of come in 4th, 5th, in the middle. And then suddenly they make a leap. So it's going to start getting really interesting as a competition.
Have you got, I know this is mean of me to ask, have you got anyone that you're going, I'd like to see more of them, I'm looking forward to seeing more of them? Have you got anyone that's like that, names wise, on the tip of your tongue?
Because I really love classic lines and I like more pure design, I'm willing Jill to really make a move now. I love her work. It's clean.
Yeah.
And I loved her transformation this week.
Well, mine, Deborah. I'm just like, she might be one that I want to see more of as well. Looking forward to with the rugby jacket, the Welsh and the little Welsh flag, and of course the blue, the seams,
the zebra Deborah pleats. Yeah.
But then I agree. I like Brogan and her GB jacket. I think it's because I just want the GB jacket. That's why.
Well, you can make your own now. The one thing we've got out of this is a lot of ideas.
Absolutely. And people have been inspired. I was talking to Anya. Anya has now bought that pattern that Marnie has done for her sporting hero. She's going to do that jacket. She's bought the pattern. So she's been inspired. We've all been inspired, and we're only on week 2.
All right.
Thank you, Carol, as always.
Good chat. As always.
Brilliant. Learned so much, so much about top stitching, and to treat that technique with more time, the technique that it deserves.
That's it. Straight lines, straight seams.
Indeed. And as always, we'd love to hear your comments, and we look forward to catching up with you in the comments. Otherwise, we will see you next week with all gathered up, and it's all about holiday week, I think, holiday wear. So that's it. We need to get out our Speedos and our bikinis.
It's coming sooner than later.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice to talk to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.